Good morning. Welcome back to Carrie Moody True Crime. Today is April 4th, 2025, and we're continuing with the My Father is a Serial Killer series. And today we're going to go over part three. So let's just get into it. Thank you guys so much for joining to listen to this and for your interest in this potential case. I appreciate you being here very much. So let's get started. Um, Following off where we left last time, we are now at March 14th and Galina posts. In 1965, my parents ended their first marriage. John called this the catalyst for his killing spree to get out of control, the reason that it became the norm. My mother, Candy, moved from Illinois to the Bay Area. She was a talented singer and artist, heralded by Rolling Stone as potentially being the next Janis Joplin. She was also well known as the posh bimbo nightclub's girl in the fishbowl. The number of celebrities that she rubbed elbows with is staggering. In 1968 and 1969, her photograph was published internationally, and a tremendous amount of articles were written about her, including by the San Francisco Chronicle, wherein she was interviewed by Herb Caen. John was insanely jealous and felt extremely competitive about the increasing attention that she was getting. At the time, John was an Illinois medical school student living in his mother's basement with lackluster grades and a major alcoholism problem. He routinely took flights from Illinois to California, specifically to stalk Candy, debating whether or not he should kill her. Meanwhile, on these trips, he killed other people in the Bay Area. Sometimes he would stay with his friend and fellow former asylum patient at the Illinois State Psychiatric Institute, Michael Fries. We talked about Michael along with Julia in the last episode. John also had a room that he rented on Stanton Street, and at another point, one in the Presidio district. For several months, either 1968 or 1969, John worked with autistic children at the Langley Porter Institute. It was around this time that he discovered rural and secluded Mendocino County and decided on it to use for his principal killing ground. Most of the victims were not actually from Mendocino County, but abducted and are sedated elsewhere. Because they were not local, he knew that the people of Mendocino County would have no idea what was going on right under their noses. Below, I attached a few of my mother's publicity pieces as well as one of her songs available on YouTube. And we're not going to listen to that, but I did listen to it on my own. And her mother indeed was very good. Definitely Janis Joplin type. This is a picture of Galina's father, John, on the far right at a his best friend's wedding. I believe he was a groomsman there. John is on the far, I guess it would be the left of the bride. This is an excerpt from Dr. John Treffel's personal diary collection in reference to his close friend slash fellow predator, Michael Fries. He says in his diary, I've got to kill Mike. It has to look like a crazy man mugged him on the street, but I'll take my time to do it right. It may take years. I'll write off the $1,000 as a loss. He's dead. It's just a matter of time. I'll have to get rid of the body. And another excerpt from a letter written by him in his personal diary says, my zodiac sign is Sagittarius, which corresponds to my name, Treffel, which translated from the Czech is from archery, a verb. It means to hit the mark. In other words, when the arrow flies towards the target, it hits the center of the target. And another one. I'll kill that son of a bitch. I'll torture his family to death. I've kept this locked inside me for 36 years. No, no, I'll kill him. I'll drive to Virginia with my 38 and wipe him out. No, I won't shoot him. I'll strangle him with my hands. And I think this is the last one with this one, but it says it finally went over the line with S calling the sheriff on my saying I'm a psychopathic killer who wants to kill her. All right, sorry, this was the last one. This one just says today, wake up 6:30. Read, chatted with Debbie, chatted with Judith. No trailer, number 5 day. Trip question marks. Asked Susan. Called Lee. Okay. Ted put it on, picked it up. Mrs. Hain implied $225 tax. Then it says mother and then an arrow to the daughter. Murdered. Drove back. 1.560 Judge Hamlin, Small Claim Court, City and County of San Francisco, California. So I don't really know what he is meaning in there. I think Galina showed this because of the mother daughter murdered drove back. I think this is why she showed this specific excerpt from his diary. All right. Then the next post was of the posse that assembled over the years to bring John Truffle to justice. Not all want their identities to be made public at the time. Perhaps this will be a shock to some, but the vast majority of the posse is actually female. Now, Galena is talking about the people that have helped her over the years with this. She says women that have, for no pay or reward, dedicated themselves to battling wits and wills with a serial killer in an effort to recover the dead. John prefers this dynamic because he is very uncomfortable with, even very afraid of, men. One posse member that is comfortable with being known is Kelly Arnold. Kelly is one of the strongest, most decent, and badass women that a person could ever encounter. She's an author, has a degree in psychology, and has worked this case for about 5 years now. She's jaw dropping fantastic at research and, in so many ways, has been my right hand. A year ago, Kelly flew halfway across the country to interview John in person and walk some of the crime scenes. She is writing a book about him, which he gives his full blessing to, and I absolutely trust that it will be done with sensitivity, kindness, and caring for the dignity of the victims and their families. As she has had access to John's unredacted diaries and will be using quotes from them in her book, I really think that she'll just plain knock this case out of the park. Also, because she's a psychology major, John gave her information regarding how victims were tortured, that he was thus far unwilling to give to anyone else. And then it says the below photograph taken by Steve R. was from an interview session with John in 2023. At that time, Kelly and I had hopes that he would reveal the location of two particular named victims. For all of our efforts, for all that we both tried, he was unwilling to say where he put them. One particular body that he's decided to hold on to come hell or high water. I don't TikTok or engage in a lot of other social media forums. Kelly's the one who would be willing to, and then it provides her TikTok. Again, her name is Kelly Arnold. And then that is just a picture of Kelly, Galina, and John. Then the next day, on March 15th, she shares more posts, and these read, my name is Galina, and I'm the daughter of a serial killer. And you'll notice she starts most of her posts that way. There is a good deal of speculation going on about what kind of father he was, particularly in light of so many photographs of me smiling with him. Growing up, I loved my father very much. He terrified me, but he was all that I had, and I loved him. Yes, I could talk about the time that he almost threw me off a cliff beside the Albion Bridge when I was 4 or 5 years old. I could talk about him having me babysat by a member of the Children of God cult around the same age. I could talk about a lot of things, but my abuse is not what the victims' families need to hear about. I only intend to share things regarding John Treffel as a father that are, as the following information is, relevant to the case. My parents split up when I was 7. My mother, Candy, suffers from mental illness, for which she was at least twice institutionalized, once in the same mental hospital, ISPI, wherein John himself was a patient. During her mental illness episodes, Candy would often become violent. One day, she kicked me in the spine and dragged me across a field by my hair. The next day at school, it hurt to walk, and I stayed in the nurse's office crying from the pain. My father kicked Candy out. He didn't want the attention that such a beating could result in. He didn't want another investigation. At the time, my parents were already being investigated by Mendocino County's Child Protective Services. I think the investigation started around 1985 and went on until something like 1989. CPS was concerned that John might be a child rapist and that Candy had covered it up. The investigation was led by Michael Rice after a Fort Bragg pediatrician discovered that I was suffering from an STD. Peterson was the lawyer's name that my father hired to ultimately make the sex crime investigation go away. Peterson succeeded, but he couldn't do anything about the vast local gossip that my father had been long term raping me. This gossip was so extreme that I ultimately had to change schools just to get away, and I've no doubt that quite a few locals will recall the rumors to this day. Prior to the pedophilia investigation, the Mendocino County Sheriff's Department had, back in 1983 or so, come into John's home in Albion in the middle of the night and ordered my father to hand me over to them. Earlier that day, my father had been in a rage and attacked my mother and two older half siblings. My mother was afraid that it had been his intention to murder the three of them, and the family therapist, Lori Bloom, urged her to contact law enforcement in case I might also, at the age of 2, be killed. Now, John and Candy split up, and he had sole custody of me from that point onward for several years. Far from being upset, my mother made clear that she was essentially glad to be rid of me. She goes on to say, now here I was with John, alone, and in the remote Albion redwood forest, he could do anything he wanted. He had almost 20 acres of complete privacy. John assigned me a job to start reading books on serial killers. He had a massive collection of these, all with meaningful underlines and side notes written by him in the margins. He had every single book ever written about Ted Bundy, sometimes two copies, one for home and one to keep at his office in Fort Bragg. Bundy was a major touchstone for him. John had a locked camper to the side of the house that he spent several hours a day in. John's library was massive, possibly containing up to 5,000 books, and he probably read 3 to 4 hours a day in that camper. Posted opposite him on the wall, there would later be hung an 8 by 10 of the Ted Bundy's corpse. Every day, that corpse stared back at him as John drank coffee in the morning. That John paid me 1 penny per page to read serial killer books actually became noticed by the Mendocino Grammar School when I was found reading a book about Ed Gein in the classroom. A district rule was passed that serial killer books were no longer allowed in grammar schools. The school did not report it to CPS that I was being made to do this. After I would read a book, John would sit me down and discuss it with me in detail. He particularly wanted to talk about how serial killers got caught. Forensics were becoming a real thing in the 80s. John had an intense love of chemistry and science, so I always assumed that this is why he's so focused on that aspect of serial killing. This is just really wild, isn't it? Galina goes on to say there was never any question about whether I could refuse to read the books. John's word was iron in our family. The majority of the time, John was very soft spoken and even gentle. It wasn't common to see him switch over to the darkness, but when that did happen, there was no warning. His eyes, which were already dark brown, would go black. His face would flush dark red. He was incredibly physically strong. You did what he told you to, period. As many preteens do, though, at 11, I stopped being as submissive. I actually worked up the nerve a few times to yell, to defy. John decided to shut this personality change right down. I was kept in a room for 3 months. I was only allowed to go to the bathroom. There were no phone calls, no TV, no letters. Absolutely no contact with the outside world. I was given jugs of water, a cardboard box filled with dry top ramen, and rye crisp, nothing more. I had a pad on the floor, maybe an inch and a half thick, a blanket, and a pillow. And there it was. He didn't speak to me. I wasn't allowed to speak to him. And the picture on the right, and also the picture on the right here, we'll talk about that in just a moment. Galina says the room had windows. I could have escaped, easily could have. I remember staring out that window so many times, very mindful that I could just run to the neighbors. But to what end? John had said that I was bad, and so I was sent to my room. I was high functioning autistic and took everything very literally. I'd seen on TV so many times that sending a kid to the room was okay. So, John keeping me in this room, eating crackers and drinking water, had to be okay on some level. What I deserved for fighting back. It occurred to me a lot that if I did run, I would be killed. John warned me hundreds of times throughout my childhood that if I left the property, I would be raped and murdered. If I wasn't raped and murdered, I'd be moved to somewhere far less pleasant than this room. And this brings us to these photos. The tomb. Technically, it was a fallout shelter that John had designed and built after reading about something similar belonging to fellow Mendocino County serial killer Leonard Lake. John had hired local constructor John Shandle to help build it, paying him under the table. He moved in a homeless handyman, Frank Laws, and his wife Sharon to also help build. John later implied that he murdered Frank and Sharon, but then went back on the implication. The tomb was underground. It opened up to a ladder going down maybe 5 or 6 feet. Inside, there were bunk beds constructed to look like those in a World War II concentration camp. No blanket, no pillows, no pleasantries of any kind. The walls weren't painted. There was no tile or any other flooring, just freezing cold cement. No electricity, no running water. It was pitch black. There were bags of dry rice and water, nothing more. From the center of the ceiling, there was a pipe for air. The opening by the ladder was kept chained rather, and padlocked shut from the outside. So let's go back and look at a couple of those pictures real quick. So that's the beginning of the construction where it was partially underground. And then I guess that's the final. Galena says if I left that room that John had put me in, he had said that I would go to live in the tomb. I knew that at that point, no one would even notice that I was gone because I was being homeschooled. All that could do was wait for the day when I would be set free. I didn't hate my father for what he did to me. Child abuse remains, for everyone that has gone through it, a deeply complicated issue. What was most important to me was that he always told me that he loved me, that he was the only one in the family that did. My mother abandoning me made me cling to my father that much tighter because I was desperate to have one person, just one blood relative that loved me. I could endure any amount of cruelty if only the end result could be to have one family member care. John was hurting me the most, but at least he was physically present. No one else was. John had 3 rules about the tomb. Don't go near it. Absolutely do not climb the hill covered in blackberry bushes that he had put on top of it in order to ensure that helicopters wouldn't be able to find it. And 3, if I violated the first 2 rules, the most important thing that I must never, ever, ever do was to look down the air pipe. The last rule threw me because I knew that there would be nothing to see down there due to the darkness. I never disobeyed the rules, though. Many years later, when John confessed to being a serial killer, he admitted that the tomb was constructed specifically for the purpose of keeping female victims long term prior to murdering them. One victim was kept underground there, he said, for 3 weeks before her murder. Man, if this is true, that's just horrific. Absolutely horrific. He said that these women were essentially special. He became, in his word, attached to them. They were assigned names as he didn't want to call them by their real names. Because he was attached to them, there are the ones that are actually buried on the Albion property, 16 women and 2 men. He's refused to say where they were abducted from, but he's repeatedly stated that most of his victims were either not local or were transported to Mendocino County, drugged for several hours away. During the period when the tomb was built, John regularly traveled to the Bay Area, which he'd called his home for so many years, and he would pick up hitchhikers between there and Albion. John claims to have taken Polaroids of the victims inside the tomb, which he buried in boxes throughout the property. There are only a few photographs of the tomb that I know of, taken during its construction. These have been shown to law enforcement. Some kinds of evidence can be easily disposed of. A 10-foot room made of solid concrete is not one of them. Still, nothing has happened. Who knows what kind of forensic evidence could be within that horrible place, just sitting there, just waiting for someone with a scientific background to do their job. So many bodies will never be found, but a blood stain with a genetic code could reveal to a family at least what happened to their loved one, and I absolutely agree. They could have the closure of no longer waiting for a missing person to come home. They could properly mourn. The families of the victims deserve that. Why don't they have it yet? So I'm really curious to know at this point kind of what you all are thinking about this. And maybe you guys are just like I am. You're just not real sure. So you don't really want to speak out. But I wonder, are you believing this? Is there potentially something here? Again, I am kind of on the side of there's probably something here. Where there's smoke, there's fire. This is another post she also made on March 15th. My name is Galina, legal name Maria. My father is a serial killer. People have repeatedly told me that I need to contact the FBI. Well, I did. I contacted them repeatedly in 2017 and 2023. The original agent that I interacted with was Christopher Taylor, who never did actually come to meet with me face to face or look at the evidence. Why would they not even begin to take her seriously? I think that's probably the biggest question. I was told by somebody in the Mendocino County DA's office that Agent Sebastian Stanley, Santa Rosa FBI office, is working on the case. Agent Stanley has never been willing to speak so much as a word to me, though there was a time when I was calling several times a week trying to get through to him and leaving messages. I tried to turn the murder weapon over to both of them or anyone in law enforcement. No one will take it. Most recently, I begged someone at the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department to take it. I even offered to bring it to them. His exact words were, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, slow down." No, I won't slow down anymore. It's been almost a decade of me asking for help. Yes, I absolutely can prove that I was asking and trying to do the right thing. And to any law enforcement reading this, I assure you that I'm not posting this to shame anyone. The bigger picture then is still the bigger picture now. The victims' families need closure. That won't happen until this is investigated properly. My father won't live forever. Please take the murder weapon and analyze John's DNA. That's all I ask. And then that is a photo of the strychnine that she found. She said he used to carry in his medical bag. These are just emails that she is providing proof that she did, in fact, email with the FBI. She's asking, she's wanting to turn over her father's medical bag and its contents, his knife, and DNA samples. Um, and they really just don't say much back to her at all. On another post, she said, discussing this information is very difficult for me. I have no problem owning that a lot of the time I'm not good at it, not nearly as articulate as perhaps others might be. I see that some people have brought up story inconsistencies, such as my father's name being spelled two ways. To clarify, John, spelled Jon, is his legal name, but he really hated that spelling. He never legally changed it, but he only ever wrote himself down as John, spelled John. If I'd spelled it Jon around him, it would have irritated him significantly and might have even started a fight. I'm making an effort to use the legal spelling, but old habits die hard. As for other inconsistencies, this is information spanning a 50-year time frame. I can understand how, given out of order, things may appear inconsistent when they're not. If there are any particular things people want cleared up, please drop that in the comment section. I'll try to get to them. She also says I'm being sent so many PMs, questions, comments, and friend requests from strangers. It's very hard for me to process. I am autistic, so socializing is far from my strong suit. Violence is furthermore difficult for all survivors to speak about. I look forward to the day when I can just go back to being a wallflower soccer mom and not have to talk about these things at all. The next post says at the Bohemian National Cemetery in Chicago, Illinois, I was 14 years old. The tombstone belongs to Carol Mestick Charles, Joanna Rezick Mestick Jenny, and Stanislav Stanley Truffle. I certainly had no idea at the time this image was taken, but my father murdered all three people. They are my great grandparents and my grandfather. There is another photo of this gravestone with John Truffle wearing his cap and gown the day he graduated from medical school. After the picture was taken, he laughed to me years later that he urinated on all three of their graves. I know that they will never have justice. My grandfather was already dying from cancer on his hospital bed when my teenage father poisoned him. My great grandparents were both elderly when he poisoned them. Autopsies weren't done to look for foul play, so none of them will ever have justice. Still, though, my grandparents or my great grandparents are part of the reason that I am fighting for it. Now we're moving on to March 16th, and you guys, just so you know, if you haven't taken a look at her Facebook, she posts multiple times a day, sometimes very late at night, early into the morning. So I'm trying to take you through the timeline as she has presented it, and then somewhere towards the end, hopefully, I've been kind of compiling different dates and names and stuff, and maybe with the help of you guys, we can try to put some of these together, possibly. So March 16th says, my name is Galina. I'm the daughter of a serial killer. As only small towns can provide, there are rumors going around now in Fort Bragg, California. One of them is that I didn't reach out to local law enforcement, that I'm lying about that. Well, I keep records. I may not be able to find them all easily. I can't find my interactions with the female officer from the Fort Bragg Police Department who I first spoke to about this case in 2020, 2021. She was amazing, very thoughtful. I sent her a tape of my father discussing dozens of his murders. Off the top of my head, I don't remember if that particular tape fell under Mendocino County jurisdiction or not. Regardless, that female officer said that she wanted to drive to Reno to speak with me in person, so long as her boss would approve the funds. And then I never heard from her again. In 2023, I interacted with Detective Sam Logan from the Mendocino County Sheriff's Department. In 2024, I interacted with Wes Raffinen from the Fort Bragg Police Department. I want to stress something. I am very back of the blue. To my mind, the Mendocino County Sheriff's Department probably saved my life when I was a toddler, and they removed me from my father's house when he was in a drunken, violent rage. Always be hopeful that one day I can meet the officers who did that, shake their hands, and tell them how much their efforts to save a child meant to me. Logan and Raffanon were both incredibly professional and decent. My problem is not at all with them, and really not with any of the local law enforcement. Frankly, I think that local law enforcement has done a lot more when I've reached out than any other jurisdiction. This is a very rural county, and local cops have a lot of crime to cover here. Manpower and funding is scarce. It's kind of that way everywhere. What could have occurred here if they had more cops to work cold cases and more funding to throw at forensics? Well, that can only be imagined. I sincerely hope that they get what they need to tackle a case of this magnitude, though. And again, on March 16th, my name is Galina. I'm the daughter of a serial killer, and I need your help. I start my post out with something to this effect generally because of a line that I read once from Mr. Rogers about how in disaster situations one should look for the helpers. People like my father epitomize what terrible things a human being is capable of, but by no means are they what defines humanity. I've always firmly believed that people as a whole are good and decent. I knew that if I asked for help online, the community would come. They would want to do what needs to be done because of basic human goodness. I'd like to point out now, as there have been so many people asking what they can do to help, that there are many people that are already helping without even knowing it. I moved back to the Mendocino coast approximately 2 years ago. By that point, I'd gone to law enforcement around 20 times, and thus far, nothing had happened. The psychological strain was breaking me. So I walked into Project Sanctuary and asked for help. It was incredibly intimidating to tell a perfect stranger in the waiting room that not only was my father a serial killer, but no one in a position of power was willing to bring him to justice. If I asked for help online, the community would come. They would want to do what needs to be done because of basic human goodness. Over the next year and a half, Project Sanctuary put so much effort into giving me aid. Over time, while I was visiting my father and coaxing murder information out of him, I was given 3 different counselors to help me cope. I'll always be grateful for the advice that they gave me. Half of my father's diaries were scanned by the first counselor. With her, I walked some of my father's crime scenes. The second always stressed self care to me. She'd ask me things like, did I have tea today? Did I paint? On the walk to Project Sanctuary from my home, did I look for flowers in my favorite color? The third counselor really stressed to me that I needed to focus on who I was beyond being the daughter of a serial killer. What future did I want? What steps did I have to take to ensure that future happened? A lot of heroism is loudly attributed to law enforcement. I'd like a moment to focus on the heroism which often goes unsung and unnoticed, that of the workers at battered women's shelters. Project Sanctuary has provided thousands of victims of rape and domestic violence in Mendocino County over the years with the psychological well being to stand again on their own 2 feet. Their contribution to the capture of a serial killer was massive. It was in a Project Sanctuary room that the sheriff's department was finally willing to meet with me face to face and, at my begging, take a sample of my DNA. So, to those who made donations to Project Sanctuary in the last 2 years, thank you. Your generosity helped me do the things that I needed to do in order to get John Treffel to open up and give body locations. Until I had a good job, your generosity brought my children Christmas presents, bus passes, and even laundry money. You helped. You helped me. You helped this case. Thank you. So many families on the coast, so many victims depend on Project Sanctuary for these kindness and to help them rebuild their lives after trauma. Whether the Project Sanctuary workers are paid or volunteered, it's not an easy job. There's an intense impact when you work with victims on a daily basis. Those associated with Project Sanctuary, those who work with rape and domestic violence victims across the United States, thank you. All right, so that takes us through the 16th. Part 4 will be coming real soon over the next day or so. And then I hope I can just keep going with these short videos that hopefully are easy to digest. And let's see what comes of this. I'm absolutely fascinated by this case. Even if it's not true, I'm still fascinated because there's this father telling this daughter all these things, but he didn't just tell her all these things. He also wrote it in his diaries. So I don't know. I don't know. You guys let me know what you think in the comments below. If you'd like to see more videos coming like this, and I am going to get started on part 4 right now. You guys have a wonderful day. Have a great weekend, and please give the video a like. Obviously, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, I truly appreciate you subscribing. And memberships are available. You can find those in the About Me section and the description of the video. You guys have a great one. Thank you so much. Bye bye.